Okay, most of y'all that know me or have ever seen any of my videos, you know that I typically do these off the cuff. I sort of just rip it and let it fly based on what I know. This one is different though. This one is one I want to do off of a script. So pardon me for that, but I really want to make sure I don't mess up because this is information that really needs to be right and I really need to get it to where when you hear this, you hear what I'm talking about. Okay, so this is a program I'm calling the Lethality Paradox. Hopefully you know what I mean when I get there. So you go to the doctor, give me the good news, the bad news, give me the good news first, because that will at least temper the bad news. If I get the bad news first, the good news might not be enough to make the bad news better. So let's start there. Teen drug use is down. Yay! That's awesome. The fact is, it's been declining for 2 decades, right? By every metric the prevention field was tracking, we were winning, right? It's going great. However, in that same period, adolescent drug overdose deaths have more than doubled. Yep, doubled. Both of those two facts cannot be true at the same time, and yet they are. That is what I call the lethality paradox. And if you have a teenager in your life, or you work with teenagers, or you set policy for them, you need to understand what happened. So, as many of you know, my name is Dan Renaud. I am a board certified addiction counselor. I've been a counselor, board certified addiction counselor for over 15 years, and I've been working in this field for over 30. I founded and operated Florida's first recovery high school. I did that for 12 years. I've worked with over 7,000 families in the school system, in the community, in our school, um, that all had varying types of behavioral challenges. And I've been watching this uh, data coming for a long time, and I've been talking about this for a long time. I want you to stick with me over the next 12 minutes or so. And what I'm going to tell you is not comfortable, but it is accurate. It's documented, and there's something that we can actually do about it. Here's what happened. Between 2002 and 2022, illicit drug use among 12th graders fell from 21 to 28%. 21 to 8%. Now, to be fair, that's taking marijuana out of the mix. If you add marijuana back in, the number looks different. Okay, but let's set marijuana aside for a minute, all right? Marijuana is moving closer to the alcohol sort of drug category, which is unfortunate, but that's what's happening. So if we look at just other drugs for a minute, from 21% to 8% is significant. Okay? It's significant. It's remarkable, right? That is real progress. The prevention field spent decades working towards exactly this outcome, right? So bravo. Okay? Between 2019 and 22, however, adolescent drug overdose went from 282 to 721, okay, in 3 years. That, by the way, in case anyone's curious, is terrifying for somebody like me that works in this field. Okay, use went down, deaths went up. These numbers used to move together. In fact, intuitively, they should move together. More people using, more people overdosing. Less people using, less people overdosing. Okay? However, they don't go that way anymore. And the reason they diverged is not what most people think. It's not that teenagers got more reckless. The neuroscience does not support that at all. It is not that parents got less attentive. Arguably, parents are even more sort of helicopterish, if you will, with their kids now than they ever been. The smartphone has made it where we can track our kids' every move, right? That wasn't the case until, the mid 90s, late 90s, really. Okay. So it's not that. And it's not that schools stop doing prevention because we do a ton of prevention. I mean, the school system does a lot of prevention, right? So that's not the issue either. The real problem, the illicit drug supply became lethal. As recently as 2023, 7 in 10 counterfeit pills seized by the DEA contained a potentially lethal dose of fentanyl. These are pills that look exactly like Xanax, Percocet, and Adderall. Incidentally, parents, if you're curious, Xanax, Adderall, and marijuana are really the top three faves of most teenagers, right? So Xanax and Adderall are, you know, the ones we worry about the most, and they're the ones that the counterfeiters also understand are in most demand, and so they make those. Yeah, they make them. They're fake, right? They look like regular pills, but they're not. They are pressed by criminal networks. They are indistinguishable from legitimate prescriptions by sight. And by 2023, fentanyl was responsible for 76% of all adolescent overdose deaths. Okay, so we get counterfeit pills. They have fentanyl in them, right? Kids don't know it. They take the pill like, hey, it's just a pill, no big deal. And they die. One pill, one experiment, one death. Right? That's how simple it is. Now, here's the part that should be on the news every single night. And I want you to let this land. 8 in 10 fentanyl deaths now involve social media contact. The deal is not being brokered in a parking lot behind a dumpster or in a back alley somewhere. It's being brokered on Snapchat. The pill arrives in the mail. The algorithm that just showed your teenager funny videos also connected them with someone that can sell them something that might kill them. So let's talk about the myth for a minute, because this is a story I've told, and most of us have, right? Because this is what we knew. Now we know different, but we used to tell this story, right? Let's talk about the adolescent brain, right? Because there's a story that's told about teenagers that I want to correct. The standard explanation is that teenage brain is like a car with no brakes. The prefrontal cortex, that is the part up here in the front, is still developing. They cannot properly assess consequences. They are impulsive by design. Now, that is more or less still true, okay? It is. Right? They are impulsive by design, and they do have a hard time assessing consequences. But that's not because their brain is broken, okay? For years, this has been an analogy that best fits what we knew and understood about how the teen brain was operating. However, recent neuroimaging research has demolished that. A landmark 2024 study using two-photon calcium imaging, very fancy, looked at what is actually happening in the adolescent prefrontal cortex. Remember, this part up here, very important. And what they found is not underactivity, it's actually hyperresponsivity to reward cues, while at the same time it's downplaying the risk. Okay? So the adolescent brain is not broken, it's doing exactly what evolution designed it to do. It is wired for exploration, novelty, and reward seeking. That is what sends young people out into the world to take risks, build confidence, fall in love, and try new things. In other words, the teenage brain is wired for new things. It's wired for novelty. It's wired for excitement, trying new things. It doesn't think about consequences. It doesn't worry about outcomes. It's not, thinking about the future, right? It's just thinking about let's do something fun and avoid things that are not fun, right? And that's what we've always said. Now we just have a way to better fine tune that with this new, imaging technology. In a safe environment, that architecture is a developmental asset. An environment with lethally contaminated pills and algorithms designed to exploit those exact reward circuits, it becomes a vulnerability. The brain didn't fail, the environment became lethal. There's also a mechanism here that clinicians call incentive sensitization. Incentive sensitization. Okay. Two separate systems in the brain. One is wanting, the other is liking. The dopamine-driven craving to seek a reward, wanting, and the actual pleasure you experience from getting it, liking. Okay. Wanting and liking. All right. With repeated exposure to addictive substances or highly stimulating environments, the wanting system sensitizes on its own, okay, separate from the liking system. Teenager may no longer even enjoy using the substance or participating in activity. The liking is actually gone. They went separate ways. But the wanting grows more intense. A cue, a smell, a notification, a sound, a location. It triggers a compulsive pull that has nothing to do with pleasure. You ever hear a kid say, I don't even want to do it anymore. I don't even want to hang out with those friends anymore. I don't even want to go to that place anymore, right? But they go, or they hang out, or they do the thing, right? Which is always been curious, right? Why, if they don't like doing it, why do they keep doing it, right? Well, they're just, whatever, teenagers. Nope. It's this divergence, okay? That's not a choice, it's circuitry. And it is exactly what social media platforms are also doing. The same neural pathway, the same mechanism, the same vulnerability. Okay, so that's enough science for a minute. Let's move on to something more familiar. Well, sort of. Let's talk about peer pressure. Okay. Let me tell you something about the peer pressure conversation we have been having with teenagers for the past 30 years. Okay. I give this talk to parents week after week, year after year, been doing it forever. I have a whole talk I do on peer pressure, and I may do that and I may link it down below, but I digress. When I started doing school-based education in the 90s with parents whose kids had been substance involved and gotten a code of conduct violation at school for substance use, then peer pressure at that time meant another teenager standing in front of your kid, um, sadly, subtly or not so subtly, encouraging them to do something that they may not have otherwise have done. Things like skip a class or maybe go study together, right? Can be positive. Things like, hey, that girl's cute, you should go kiss her. Or I'm going out with this guy and I'm thinking about having sex with him. All kinds of things, good and bad, from smoking cigarettes to drinking alcohol to who to date to try this pill. We could address that. We had refusal skills. We could do role playing. We could talk about social dynamics. We had tools, right? The screen really changed all that. The teenager is now an algorithm that is invisible. It is personalized and it is operating at a scale no human relationship can match. And it knows your teenager's reward profile better than you do. Okay, let me say it again. The teenager we're dealing with now is an algorithm and it's invisible and it's personalized. It literally matches your kid's likes and wants and desires and motivation better than any other human could ever do. Right? Okay, I lied. Back to the science. Functional MRI studies show that digital reward stimuli activate the caudate nucleus, fancy word, which is the exact same brain region implicated in addiction to substances. These platforms use intermittent variable reinforcement, the same psychology architecture as slot machines, to maximize engagement. Think about this. Pull down to refresh. Sound familiar? Check if someone liked you or liked your post. Mm-hmm. Wait for the notification. Mm-hmm. See? Get that intermittent variable reinforcement, right? That, oh, did they do it? Oh, did they do it? Oh, did they do it? Oh, they did it. Yay. Oh, did they do it? Oh, did they do it? Oh, did they do it? Hey, they did it, right? That is the kind of stuff that gets you moving, gets you engaged, and keeps you engaged, right? The adolescent brain is an ideal target for this. As a result of chronic overstimulation, we come up with a symptom or a syndrome known as anhedonia. Okay. Anhedonia is a blunted baseline reward response where real life starts to feel gray and muted. Nothing is as interesting as the screen. Nothing provides as much stimulation. In that state, some teenagers start seeking more potent stimulation, and the contaminated drug supply is ready. Dr. Um, Labor, who is widely known on social media, Dr. Nicole Labor, she's an addiction medicine doctor. Brilliant, amazing, doing awesome work. Says anhedonia is like eating a cardboard cracker with no salt, right? That's kind of how it feels, right? When you've been that stimulated over and over and over again, normal life starts to feel kind of unimaginary. It's just bleh. Who wants to do it, right? So I'm looking for something more, 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 more. When you think about the old subliminal, now most of y'all aren't going to know this, but it it fits the narrative, right? The old subliminal advertising controversy. I know. What is that, Dan? Well, if you Google it under history, you'll find it. All right. The story about invisible frames of suggestive ads encouraging us to act. These so-called manipulative tactics, describing popcorn and Coke spliced into movie reels, were designed to drive concession sales. That caused genuine public alarm. We had real national conversations about this, about the ethics of influencing people without their awareness. Okay, remember that. Most of you watching this will have no idea what I'm talking about. But believe it or not, we actually had classes in school and watched movies that warned us about these very slimy, underhanded tactics. Hold that thought about classes helping kids understand about the treachery of subliminal messages. We'll be back to that in a minute. Now, flash forward to today. What these algorithms do is not subliminal. It is continuous, personalized, and recalibrated in real time based on your teenager's behavior. It is not one frame in a movie. It is the entire experience engineered around their individual reward profile. Our kids are navigating this with no map and no framework for understanding what is being done to them. Yet there is no alarm bells, no classes in school, and no public discussion. Remember DARE, D-A-R-E, that well-meaning program that was designed to, keep kids from using drugs? It taught kids to just say no to strangers with drugs. Okay. And well-meaning though it was, um, most of us now believe that it, maybe missed the mark, but not intentionally. It just didn't know. We didn't know any better, but we tried. Okay. We need a curriculum now, though, that teaches them how algorithms work, how variable reinforcement manufactures craving, and how the counterfeit pill supply chain runs directly through the platforms they use every day. Yes, we don't have that. I know. How do we not have that? We don't. Okay. Let's get closer to home for a minute. I want to talk about Florida because Florida has even made this worse. The American healthcare system has treated mental health and substance use disorder as separate problems for decades. Separate facilities, separate funding streams, separate billing codes, separate clinical teams working on the same patient in different buildings, often never even talking to each other. This is not administrative inconvenience. It is neurobiological impossibility. These conditions share the same brain circuitry. They require one treatment plan, not two separate programs to compete for the same kid. And in Florida, not to throw any shade, but in Florida, the legislature defunded two of the three recovery high schools serving this population. One in Orlando, the one in Jacksonville, both gone in the middle of a fentanyl epidemic. What is a recovery high school? Recovery high school is a program designed for teenagers around 14 to 19 years old who struggle with substance use issues. They're trying to finish school and graduate in an environment where being drug-free is supported through clinical intervention and positive peer pressure, right? Do they work? Well, there's about 50 of them around the country that do amazing stuff. We did amazing stuff, and yet they shut us down. School in Jacksonville, the first one in the state, was providing assistance to over 700 families annually. These are teens that were struggling with substance use. And in our last year of the high school, provided diplomas to over 100 students, students that were not expected to graduate otherwise. They would have never graduated in their homeschools, right? A 2025 study of 416 students across 20 recovery high schools, those students that were enrolled for at least 90 days in a recovery school had a 101% higher odd of staying clean off cannabis and 68% higher odds of staying clean off alcohol compared to students who left earlier. We had proof the model works, and they cut it anyway. When those schools were defunded, we did not save money. In fact, if I told you what it cost to run a recovery school versus what it cost to run a treatment center versus what it cost to put a kid in DJJ or in a cage, you would be really surprised. Needless to say, it's much, much cheaper. We deferred the cost. It showed up in emergency rooms, in DJJ intakes, and in families that do not get their kid back. Statistics say that almost 70% of juvenile justice involved youth struggle with a substance use disorder and a mental health challenge. That is not a budget decision. It is false economy with a human price. Interestingly, other states have figured this out. Minnesota, Texas, Massachusetts, among others. Uh, they are funding recovery high schools as standard infrastructure, not as grants that expire. They are mandating naloxone in schools. They are building the continuum that we built in Jacksonville, and for 12 years was serving kids until Tallahassee decided that we were a line item that could be cut. So enough of the problems, let's talk about solutions. I want to talk to you about what works because the science is not uncertain. The gap is in implementation, not in knowledge. Most rigorously studied family-based intervention we have is called multidimensional family therapy. In 2023, a study of the University of Miami tested it with justice-involved youth. 95% of them finished treatment versus 86%. I mean, 86% no rearrest after 18 months, 70% increase in full-time employment after 6 months. Those outcomes cut across every domain that matters. Not just staying clean, but staying employed, staying out of the system, and staying with their families. There is also an intervention I want to mention that gets dismissed as a soft add-on that really should be more mainstreamed. That is CBT music therapy. A 2021 study tested it against standard cognitive behavioral therapy for adolescent smartphone internet addiction. The music therapy group had a 90% treatment completion versus 86% with CBT alone. Significant improvements in impulsivity that CBT did not produce. The mechanism is not creative expression. Music activates the caudate nucleus. Remember that from earlier? Yeah. The same reward node implicated in addiction, providing an alternative dopaminergic, such a hard word to say, response that competes with craving. You're giving the reward system somewhere to go. That is not a drug. We call these things recovery high schools, music therapy, family interventions, school-based interventions, such as classes on safe use and algorithmic manipulation, and others, recovery capital. And the evidence on recovery capital is consistent and measurable. Each unit increases a young person's recovery capital, which includes self-efficacy, healthy relationships, community connection, and a sense of purpose that is associated with meaningfully better substance use outcomes. Recovery capital works because it matches how the brain is wired. It does not suppress the reward system, it redirects it. So let me bring this back to where we started. Use is down. Awesome. Deaths are up. Absolutely terrible. The study's supply is contaminated. The digital environment is amplifying craving and providing the procurement channel. The clinical systems are fragmented. The recovery infrastructure is defunded. And we're still having the wrong conversation. The adolescent brain is not the problem. It is working exactly as designed. The problem is an environment that has become systematically hostile to the developing reward system, and a policy and clinical apparatus still organized around a threat that does not exist in the form we were trained to address it. We do not need to fix teenagers. We need to fix the environments we have allowed to exploit them. I built the Reach Center because this work is not theoretical. I have been in these rooms with these families for 30 years. I know what moves the needle, and I'm not going to wait for someone else to say it. If you're a parent, talk to your kids, not a lecture, a conversation. Remember, connection before correction. One pill is all it takes. If you're a clinician, integrate your treatment. Mental health and substance use are one problem, one plan. Advocate for your clients. Advocate in locally with your provider, with your payers. Advocate statewide with the legislature, and advocate nationally, with folks that write policy. If you're a legislature or a school board member, put the money back into recovery schools. Mandate naloxone. Fund algorithm literacy. It's unbelievable to me that there's programs that don't have the schools that don't have naloxone in every classroom. It's crazy to me that we don't have a recovery school in every major hub of every state in the country. Okay. They work. We have decades of data that supports the fact that they work. Why they're not there? No idea. Okay. But we don't have them and they need to be there. Algorithm literacy, right? it is imperative. If we don't start having structured time for kids to use their screens in the school system, we're going to continue to have more and more challenges with kids that are trying to use their screen as a workaround when it comes to actual uh, learning and social functioning. There's no reason for them not to. If we had a class every day that they went to that talked about how the algorithms work, beginning at elementary school, how the algorithms work, how they use those algorithms to manipulate and seek outcomes that they're looking for, and how those algorithms can be used to uh, cause people to act in a way they might not otherwise act, right? We need to teach kids to understand that, just like we've taught them how to worry about other dangers, right? Don't talk to strangers. Don't get in cars with people you don't know. Don't go on certain places on the computer. All those things we did. Why? Because we realized it was safety. We look at this the same way. We need to have a class in school where the kids learn safe use around the screen, where they learn algorithm manipulation, where they learn how to regulate and monitor themselves and create boundaries around their use of the screen. The screen's not going anywhere. The screen's going to become more and more a part of our lives. We have to figure out a way to integrate that into that curriculum instead of trying to lock kids out, because all it does is make them want to do it more. Taking their phones up at the beginning of the day and giving it back to them is a great idea, but it doesn't teach them safety and algorithm literacy. We need to do that. We need to do that. All right. This is not a political discussion, it's biology. I wrote a white paper that's linked below that talks about this. There's a one pager for policymakers that's also linked below. Read them, share them, send them to someone that needs to act on them. These kids are counting on us to finally have the right conversation. Thank you so much for listening to me. And my contact information is below. I welcome and will respond to every comment. I hope this gets people talking. You can find out more about us at the Reach Center for Teen and Family Healing. You can find out about me on the web. I'm all over the socials. Dan, Renaud, Jax, Jax, at gmail.com is my email, and dot com is my website, or a website. You can find out more information over there. Please reach out. I'll respond to every comment. I look forward to hearing from you. Until next time, peace.